Well, hello and welcome to the channel. My name's Johnny and you're watching Hillbilly Modeling. Now this is going to be part 7 of our M31 U.S. Tank Recovery Vehicle by TAKOM in 1/35 scale. And in this video we're going to be doing all those little things that's left to do. We're going to be doing the chipping and the weathering and the final assembly and a couple of little extra add-ons. So we've got a whole lot to get to. So let's go ahead and jump down to the bench and get this one finished up. So the first thing we're going to do is some paint chipping. So we do have camel, which is on the left here, and olive, which is on the right. Now the camel is the lighter color that we used in our tan, and then the olive is a much lighter color green that we're going to use over top of our mixed olive drab, which we did in our last video. And we just need a little bit of this paint, so I'm going to put a little bit of that in the paint palette here. And as you can see, this is a kind of a thick paint. So I am going to cover up one of these colors so that it doesn't dry on me. And then here we have our sponge. Now this is a synthetic sponge, and I'm just going to use the tweezers to hold it. Now you can use natural sponge, but for this scale, probably the best thing to do is to use something that has real close cells. That way we can get some real fine chipping. And we're going to preload our sponge with a little bit of paint. And then we're going to dab that off. Sorry, my hand's in the way. But we're going to dab most of that paint off because we don't want big globs of paint. We're not really painting the surface. We just want little bitty bits of paint left onto the sponge cells so that we can create this chipping. Now the most effective chipping to do is just do really small chips, and here you can see I made a little mistake. So I do like to keep a cotton swab and a little bit of water next to me so I can get rid of that right away, and then we can go back to our chipping. So in the areas that need more chipping, you'd like to have more of a chipping effect, just go over those areas more with 2 or 3 passes. It always looks better if you have a lot of chips that are connected versus great big chips. And then we're going to switch up our colors, of course. So we're doing green on green, the light green over our dark olive drab, and then, of course, the camel going on over our mixed tan color here. And it's also a good idea every now and then on these big flat surfaces to put just a little bit of interest there by putting a chip on those big flat surfaces so that it's not, looking too new. And here we're doing around these corners. I really like how this camel is working. Now on our boom, we do have an area where the hoist cable is going to be going across this support structure here on our boom. So we're going in with the olive with a paintbrush, and we're just going to make some wear marks here where the cable would slap onto that steel. Now once I get that on, I am going to come back in and put some rub marks. Now this is Tester's flat steel, which I use for dry brushing all the time, and this is just dry brushing that into place. Kind of make that look really like the cable has been rubbing it down to the steel, and that'll give us a nice effect there. Now, of course, when you're doing chipping, you want your chips to really make sense. So you're going to put those in high wear areas. But also, this vehicle has a lot of rivets and bolts that stick out. So it's a really nice detail. So I'm going to use that same chipping color as you can see here and come back in and just highlight all the rivets and bolts, depending upon what section of the vehicle we're on. And this will help that stand out just a little bit. It's really easy to do, and I know there's a lot of them, but I think it's going to pay off in the end. And of course, we're going to want to use the camel color to come back in over all the areas that have our dark tan and just highlight those rivets. Now, it does look like those rivets are really bright, but trust me, Well, I hope you trust me, but it's going to kind of blend in a little bit more when we do our weathering. So here we're coming in with just a little bit of German Panzer Gray. Now you can use black for this, but this is kind of a two-tone effect where the metal has been, or the paint I should say, has been rubbed completely down or chipped completely down to the metal. And you can use this in the very large chips that you have, which hopefully aren't too large because we want to keep everything as much in scale as possible. But this gives an added dimension. Now what you don't want to do is you don't want to go over the entire chipping scheme and do too many of those. So this is clear X22, and it is mixed up for my airbrush, so it is thinned with the X20A thinner for the acrylic paints. And we're doing that to get it ready for decals. I find that the decals set so much better over a gloss coat than just the flat surface. And as you can see here, the instructions tells us how to put on these decals. Now these are water slide decals. So we're going to go here to the paint scheme that we've chosen, and we'll just go ahead and select all of our decals that we're going to go and put on this particular vehicle. Of course, you need to cut these out and make sure that you don't leave that little circled number there in black on your decal when you're soaking it in the water. Now, these being water slide decals, it just takes a few seconds, about 20 seconds or so, and you need to test and make sure that the decal is ready to come off. Now, these decals are stiff enough, I should say, that they don't fold up on themselves willingly, so we're able to pull it free from the sheet rather than to slide them off. The biggest thing is making sure that these decals are straight. I have a hard time with stars that are in circles, so here I'm just using my ruler to try to make sure that it's lined up with the top edge of that toolbox that we're putting this large decal on. And we want to make sure that it is in good shape there before we roll it down. Now, a lot of times we use micro set, and I have used micro set here to go underneath the decal, which just helps with adhesion. And there is a little spot around a latch that we need to actually use micro sol on. Now, micro sol is a little bit more aggressive, and it tends to, or it's intended to, I should say, to soften up that decal. And so I really need it to conform around that latch right there on that toolbox. And so we're going to use micro sol to soften that decal and just let it set for 30 seconds to a minute and then just roll it down. And as you can see, it's started to actually press down around that detail, and another application is needed. Now you may have to do this 2 or 3 times. I don't like to leave it on there too long because it may soften the decal to the point where you can pull it back up. As you can see there, we've got it to settle down around that detail really nice. So with our decals on and nice and dry, give them plenty of time to dry, we'll go back over top of them with the X22 clear coat, and we are going to seal all of our decals in. That way we don't have to worry about them peeling up later. Now once our decals have dried from painting over them with the clear coat, we're going to use some panel liner. So what does panel liner do for us? Well, it helps bring out these rivets, you know, and any of the other details that are on the model. They tend to get lost in the color of the vehicle, and by adding some panel liner, what we can do is bring those back out and give them a little bit more depth. That way the model doesn't look so bland. So we're going to have to do a little bit of cleanup, and since this panel liner is a enamel-based product, we can use the Tester's enamel thinner to help clean it off. Now, using a cotton swab, if you were to just swipe over top of these, you'll be pulling cotton fibers for days off of the cotton swab. So on these little bitty details, if you just roll a dampened cotton bud or Q-tip with a little bit of enamel thinner on it, you can take care of excess panel liner. And I tend to use too much panel liner, so I usually end up with a whole lot of cleanup to do. But this goes rather quickly, as you can see here. Just targeting and tapping. Now, you don't want to saturate all of the, too much the panel liner, or you'll pull it all off, and then you'll have to go back and reapply it. But that's not a great big deal. And here you can see we're also going to do that all over the vehicle. And on these flat surfaces and the areas where there are panel lines, right, a little swipe across it works very well. And that'll get everything cleaned up. So you do want to go back and look at this after you think you've gotten everything done, and make sure that you've got all of it taken care of. Because once we do our top coat over top of this, you won't be able to go back and fix that unless you repaint some areas. So we're going to take the same black panel liner, and we're going to go to our tracks here. We do want these guide horns to be darker. So we're going to use that panel liner for that, and also around all of our end connectors and our track links there to help tone it down a little bit, because if you remember from the previous video, we did paint these Panzer Gray, and I like using the Panzer Gray because it looks more like older rubber than just painting them black would be. And the panel liner gives us a nice contrast between the gray, the dark gray, I should say, and the black panel liner. So we're going to use the same method here for cleaning up and getting that dry brushing that we did previously on our track links here, or I should say end connectors. Just rolling it across, and that'll bring those highlights back out for us and clean up any little messy areas that we got. And we're also going to want to clean off any panel liner that we got on our track pads. This goes pretty quick. So our decals are nice and pristine, which is exactly what we don't want them to be. Unless, of course, you're doing one of those models that are museum quality and factory fresh. But in this case, we're just going to do some light chipping to kind of help these decals blend into the rest of the vehicle. Here I'm trying to depict a vehicle that's lightly used, so we are going to go in and just put a few scratches here and there and a few chips. And that's just using the chipping colors that we used before. As you can see there, that will help give the impression of a used vehicle. So once we're done with all of our chipping and scratches and everything, we're going to seal everything in with this flat clear acrylic clear coat. And this is Model Masters acrylic, which is really hard to find these days. I am going to have to get me some another clear coat to be using, because this is getting very hard to find. But I love this paint. Now that we've got everything clear coated, there is a little detail here that's left out. So TAKOM has molded in the little loops where the webbing would be for our straps. Unfortunately, they didn't give us any straps of any kind. And I'm sure you could do some aftermarket, maybe photo etch or something like that. But here I am just going to use some Tamiya masking tape here. This is the 1mm wide masking tape. And we're just going to cut little bitty strips here and just kind of get it to go from loop to loop. And we just, if if you have used masking tape before, you know that it wants to curl up at the ends no matter what you do, especially if you don't want it to. So we are going to go in with some CA glue and just touch it and glue the ends of it down so that it'll stay secure. Because once we get some paint on it, it would want to curl up away from the model, and we really don't want that to happen. So a little bit of CA glue will go a long way here to make sure that that stays in place. And now I'm going to use the chipping color that we used before, this is just the olive that we are going to paint all of our straps this light olive color here. Now, since it is covering up that yellow that the tape is manufactured in, we'll probably have to use 2 coats. But I think this will add an extra dimension and a little bit of extra detail here for our kit. And here we can see that we've got all of our straps in place, holding all of our tools down. And I did not go in and make any of the buckles because 1 millimeter wide wire buckles is a little bit more than I think I'm willing to tackle. So we are going to go back to some dry brushing with this Tester's enamel flat steel to show the bare metal in some areas. And one of those areas is going to be, of course, these cables. So we do have the stay cables that are on our boom and also our hoist cable for the winch. And so in the dry brushing application here, you want to unload as much paint as you can from your brush. We don't want to paint it. We just want to rub the pigments off of the brush onto the item. In this case, being the cable. And that'll help pick out some detail there so that it doesn't look so stark and fresh and black, because this vehicle, we're going for kind of a slightly used, slightly dirty vehicle here. And of course, you do need to be careful that you don't get the silver paint on any area that you don't want dry brushed or that exposed metal to show up. And of course, I do need to mention that if you get too much silver on there, you can come back with enamel thinner and clean it off and kind of dress it up. So I am going for a lightly muddied vehicle, so we do need to add a little bit. So we're going to use Vallejo thick mud here, and this is the European color. It is a medium tan color, I guess, or a real light brown, but it is a water-based acrylic, which means that if you get it on something that you don't want it on, you can wipe it away with a cotton bud, slightly dampened with water, to clean it off whatever surfaces that you get it on that you don't want it on. Here we're going to concentrate on where the tracks are going to go over top our support rollers, and of course dirt and mud is going to fall down on top of our suspension bogies here. So we're going to add just a little bit of texture there to simulate that mud or dirt that's going to fall down on top of the suspension components. And we'll also add just a little bit underneath our sponsons there, and also on our slack adjusters for our idlers on the rear of the vehicle, and a little bit on the front just to add some texture. And here we can see where I've added it to the bottom of the sponsons because of course the track is going to sling debris there. And then up underneath the front of the vehicle as well, there will be some mud and dirt that's adhered to the bottom of the vehicle. So next up, we're going to use AK Interactive's Earth Effects. Now this is an enamel-based product, different than the thick mud that we were using before, which was acrylic. And we're going to be using this to simulate the mud. Now, since it is an enamel-based product, we can thin it with our Tester's enamel thinner, or whatever thinner it is that you'd like to use. And so I'm just going to do this in really small batches because as you can see here, it is rather thick, and I kind of want it to flow around stuff. So we're going to dilute it down to about a 50-50 mixture here, half enamel thinner and half the mud effects, and we'll just mix it up with our brush. It's really easy to use. And once we get it well mixed, we're going to start underneath our sponsons there to give some mud effects here to not only the suspension components, but also the side of the hull that's down on the lower part of the vehicle. So you just need to kind of brush it on here and just let it run, let it go wherever it wants to go, because that's kind of what mud does. It just kind of goes where it wants to. So I just want to control it just enough that I don't get it on everything that I'm not ready to actually work on. So we're also going to have to do, of course, our road wheels and our idler as well. I've went ahead and pressed the idlers into place. No adhesive or, to me, extra thin or anything needed there because it is a nice friction fit. And we're going to dirty up the tires as well on our road wheels a little bit there. And we want to make sure that it gets into all those little nooks and crannies there, because these road wheels have quite a bit, seeing how they're the spoke design, the old design for the road wheels. And here we're just going over the rubber portion, the tire portion of our road wheels as well, because of course they're going to be a little dirty. So we'll go ahead and take care of those as well. Now, of course, there's going to be some streaking, and we did lay in a layer of that earth effects on the lower hull here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to use a brush here with some enamel thinner on it and create streaks because the lower portion of the hull is going to be visible underneath the track. So we really want that extra kick, that extra detail there where water would be coming down and rinsing some of that mud and debris off. And I found the best way to do this is by brushing up with that wet brush and then just allowing it to run back down, giving us that that effect. Of course, because of the angle I'm holding at here, you can't see that very well, but there you go. You can see there how it's run back down and it's collected along the bottom. So next up, we're going to take a look at our tracks, because it's time to put those on. And so the shorter run is up towards the front. So we're going to go ahead and snap our drive sprockets into place. Now the longer angled run is in the rear, so we don't want to put our drive sprockets on the wrong side, or I should say the wrong end of our tracks. And so with that into place, we'll go ahead and put the drive sprocket on the other track as well. And here we can just go ahead and press our drive sprocket into place and snap our tracks over the idler itself. Now we're going to want to make sure that this is fully seated so that everything lines up. And now we can go ahead and install the upper run of our track. And as you can see, it is a snug fit, but, you know, we kind of expect that, especially with the fenders on the vehicle. And so we do need to spread the track in the rear just a little bit to get it to snap in. And there we go. So I do have a little bit of an issue here trying to get it to line up with the top of the drive sprocket itself. So I am kind of having to press it into place because it is a tight fit. Remember, once you add paint to plastic parts, those dimensions get a little bit smaller. So it is a good snug fit. We just get it pressed into place there. So I need this track to stay into place. We're going to use that medium CA glue here. And the top run tends to bow away from the support rollers here, the return rollers. So we're going to just use a little bit of CA glue there using a cocktail stick. And we'll just put it right on top of our support rollers. and that's going to hold the track down so that it doesn't bow up away from it. It looks much more natural. And once we pull the track down into place there, I have some very small, well, they're not very small, but some small sections of sponge that we use for sponge chipping. They work really well to add tension between the sponson and the top of the track. And that'll just press it right down into place for us. And that'll hold it while the CA glue sets up. And that's very important. We give that CA glue time to grab onto that track. And then we can just go ahead and glue the rear section of that top run right to the rest of the track there, going around our slack adjuster. And we do want to push it together to make sure that we got good contact there. And once we've allowed that CA glue to set up, it only takes a couple of minutes. And we can go ahead and remove our synthetic sponge here that's holding it into place. And hopefully I didn't glue the sponges to it there. And of course we'll do that to the other side as well and put that track on. So with our tracks on, we can go ahead and apply our earth effects. And this is the same mixture that we had before, 50-50, with the enamel base earth effects as well as the Tester's enamel thinner, which we use to thin it with. And I am going to use a little bit of enamel thinner just to paint over the surface here with it, just to kind of wet it up. Which should hopefully keep us from having tide marks. If you apply products over top of a dry surface, you tend to get a lot of tide marks, and we want to try to minimize that as much as possible. So we're going to put our earth effects here on top of it. I'm just dabbing it onto the flat horizontal surfaces, and then we'll just add plenty of product around it there, which is going to give it a dirty look. And then for the vertical sides or any slanting side where water is going to run off, we will just drag a fairly dry brush here over top of it, and that'll pull the pigment down and give us some streaking effects here. And this process goes really quick, so you just got to be ready and just jump right on in there. Now you can always come back if you want more color, more effects, and add another coat on top of it until you get the intensity that you like. And we're going to use the same process here on the rest of the vehicle, just kind of dabbing and dropping our pigment onto the flat horizontal surfaces. And for our vertical surfaces, we'll lay down that base of enamel thinner for it, and then we'll go ahead and add in our product here. And depending upon how dirty you want it, is going to determine how much of this you're going to put on. As you can see, it flows really easy. I do come back in and put a second coat on it, especially over the decals, because I kind of want those to kind of blend in a little bit, and we don't want them looking so new. And we're going to take our wide brush again and just pull this down in a vertical motion here, and that's going to give us our streaks. Now once our earth effects is nice and dry for us, I'm going to use this Vallejo engine color here. Now this is an acrylic, and I'm not going to shake this up because this is kind of a dark color. So I'm just going to use the product without shaking all the pigment up in it, because I kind of want this lighter, kind of a caramel color. And that's because these were gasoline powered vehicles which used a radial aircraft engine. So it was just powered by straight gasoline. And so going with our lighter, muddy look that we got going on, we're going to use this to simulate spills. And of course, next to these caps, it is a slanted surface where the fuel would run off. And of course, it's going to run down that edge, so I've added it to that. And that gives us an opportunity to put in a few runs down the side of the vehicle as well. A little bit more interest, and I think it looks pretty good. Of course, we're going to do that to the other cap as well. I believe all the caps on the rear of this vehicle were for fuel tanks. There's no coolant in this engine, of course, because it was air-cooled. So next, I'm going to take this stenciling brush. It's got these real thick bristles, and you can see where we have the product, the weathering mud enamel on our tracks as well here, because when I did the sides, I went ahead and just put that all over the tracks and the rubber parts and everything. And I'm just using a little bit of the enamel thinner, and we're just going to put some streaks, some scuff marks onto the rubber surfaces there. Not really going for a real heavy look, but you can streak it as much as you like. And if you don't like what you've done, you can go back and add more product and try it again. But with a little bit of abrasions there. We'll do that both on the front and the back, where you can see the track where it turns around. Not only the drive sprockets, but the idlers as well. And kind of give us the impression that these pads are actually making contact with the surface of the ground. So now we need to go ahead and attach our spare road wheels, which were used for vehicle repairs. And I did bevel out the opening there so that they would actually sit nicely on the flange. For some reason, they didn't really they wanted to wobble around, so I'm using Tamiya's thick cement for this, which will give us plenty of holding power to hold these spare road wheels in place. The big thing here is to make sure that they're aligned with the front of the vehicle, so that they don't look all crooked. Make them as straight as I possibly can here. So now we can go ahead and add our crane assembly here, and we just simply slot it into place and rotate it around. I'm going to have it displayed with the boom in the forward position, so all I have to do now is just to pin those braces. And once that's done, we can go ahead and insert our hoist cable here. And since it is a nice stiff wire, I don't have to worry too much about bending it out of shape, but we do need to feed it down into the small hole there in the front plate of the turret for the cable to go through. And once we get that into place, I'm just going to use a little bit of CA glue here, and that'll go on that front cable sheave where the cable is going to bend down into the front of the vehicle. And that'll hold it into place for us. Now, you don't really have to do this because gravity will hold it into place, but I want to make sure that it stays kind of dangling down in a vertical position rather than getting a little sideways on us there. And so there we are. We're all finished up with this kit. I know you guys have been waiting for this for a while. But you can't rush things. Take your time, and this kit goes together actually pretty good. There was only a couple of issues. One, the cable, that copper cable that TAKOM includes with the kit was too large to do what they wanted us to do with it. And that was the cable stays for the boom as well as the hoist. Which we replaced with twisted wire, our own copper wire. And then, of course, the sheave for those stay cables that went around it. There was no way for that cable to fit around it. So, also that very same sheave, it was a little bit too thick, and we had to sand it down a little bit. But that's really the only two issues that we had. The rest of it is pretty much straightforward. Of course, this kit comes with a fully working suspension, which you can say it's a plus or a minus, but in this type of kit, with all this detail, you can expect a lot of parts. But the tracks that they include with the kit is link and length. So the workable suspension doesn't really work out well. You'll have to fix that into place unless you want to use a fully workable track, in which case this kit would be very good for that. And you'd be able to put it on a diorama over rough terrain, and that would be a nice addition if you wanted to upgrade this kit to a workable track. All in all, it is a great kit, very enjoyable to put together, especially if you really like assembling things, which I do. But I would not recommend this as a beginner's kit. It has a lot of moving parts and a lot of structure that a beginner would find quite challenging, and you might not get the results that you want. But after you've had a few kits under your belt and you're ready for a challenge, this would be a great kit to build. And it is a really excellent subject. You don't see a lot of these kits being built. So that would be something really special for your own collection. So special thanks to all my subscribers. It's because of you guys I keep building these kits and videoing for you to enjoy. And I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know in the comments. And if you are new to the channel and you're not a subscriber, I hope today I earned that subscription. So until next time, guys, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.